Viele kennen sie vielleicht noch gar nicht, weil sie
Many people may not even know them because they fly under the radar. And yet, they outshine the other watches with their special dials. Well, at least at night. We'll find out which watches I mean after the intro. Welcome to a new talk from our Laco showroom. Today with Dario Laurin Bär from marketing. Hello, Dario. Great to have you here.
Hello, Amina.
Today we're talking about the Wien and Venedig in 39 and 42 millimeters.
Exactly right.
The watches are part of the Pilot Watches original series, which have a historical model, and we can see that very clearly from the look of the watches.
Genau, also wie du schon richtig gesagt
Exactly.
hast.
The Wien and Venedig watches are as much part of the original Pilot series as the other original Pilot watches that we have in our collection, which you can clearly tell from the case. Firstly, the shape of the case. You can clearly see the typical straight lugs, which we also had in the observation watches from the 1940s. We have the dark finish of the case, sandblasted dark. There's the distinctive pilot's crown, which is very, very grippy, and the closed case back with the typical engraving as well as the FL engraving on the left flank.
Typischen Bodengravur, genauso wie mit der FL-Gravur an der linken Flanke.
So all of the typical pilot watch elements are reflected here.
Yes, exactly.
Right, but the dial is atypical. Here we have a very special feature.
Exactly right. We have a pilot watch here with a completely bright dial, a so-called luminous dial, or a luminous cookie, which is not very typical for a pilot watch. Instead of the matte black dial that you normally see, we have this creamy white dial.
Was man normalerweise kennt, sondern eben ja, dieses cremeweiße.
So the dial was turned upside down, so to speak.
Genau, richtig. Also bei
Yes, exactly right. In the case of the Paderborn, for example, the dial is matte black and the indices and hands are luminescent. Here we have inverted the whole thing, so the entire dial lights up. The indices and hands are matte black as to provide enough contrast.
Also wir haben diesmal ein Modell, wo das ganze
So this time we have a model where the entire dial lights up. You can clearly see this in the night shots we're going to show you now. How did Laco come up with this idea?
That's actually a very interesting question. As I said in the beginning, it's very atypical for a pilot watch. However, we have certainly had inquiries or requests for a pilot watch with a light-colored dial. And so then we were faced with the question of what to do. Then, of course, you have a bright dial, and Laco stands for very good readability, both at night and during the day. And the Superluminova C3 luminous material, for example, which we use in our pilot watches, is very bright. Bright dial plus bright luminous material works pretty well at night, but not during the day. So the readability during the day was not as good. We therefore decided, why not just do it the other way around, take a new approach and make the entire dial luminescent, and then the hands, numerals, and indices in black. That way, we still have the beautiful contrast during the day and great readability at night.
Und bei Nacht eine super Ablesbarkeit.
A bright dial and bright luminous material is a big challenge. How did Laco deal with this during the development process?
Exactly. As you say, we then basically have a bright dial and the Superluminova C3 that we use on the other pilot watches, which is also bright. We still didn't have a good contrast during the day, but Laco stands for very good readability both during the day and at night. So we thought, okay, how can we tackle this problem, or how can we overcome this challenge? Of course, we could have just said that instead of normal C3 luminous material, we would use luminous material with colored pigments mixed in, which would then appear dark and glow slightly. But then it's not as bright and it doesn't glow for as long, which wouldn't have been great for our customers. So we decided to take a different approach and cover the entire dial with Superluminova and then create the contrast for daytime readability with matte black prints of the indices and numerals and matte black frame hands.
Genau, mattschwarzen Rahmenzeigern zu erzeugen.
Ich glaube, das ist sehr
I
untypisch.
think it's very unusual in the watch world to have a dial that is completely covered with Superluminova. It's much easier in the imagination than it actually is, isn't it?
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's when we actually faced the next challenge, because it sounds simple at first. We simply take the luminous material that is also used to print the numbers or to fill in the frame hands and just brush the whole dial with it.
Und bepinseln einfach das ganze Zifferblatt so mäßig.
But now you have a much larger surface.
Yes, exactly. This is a much larger surface, and it is incredibly difficult to process a material like the Superluminova over a large area, to ensure that no cracks appear during the drying process, avoiding very small hairline cracks, ensuring that the dial is evenly covered and that it doesn't become blotchy, and then printing the numerals, the indices, and the pilot triangle on that surface, and making sure that everything is flush, that it isn't blotchy, and that the luminous material somehow doesn't shine through the numerals. So yes, those were challenges, but I think we mastered them quite well.
Zwei Herausforderungen, die wir aber, glaube ich, doch ganz gut gemeistert haben.
Daraus entstanden ist ein schöner
The result is a beautiful light cookie, as we lovingly refer to it in-house. Our community asked us a lot of questions. I went through our social media and picked out 3 questions for you. The first question is, are you planning on having the model with a glass base?
Right. I'm afraid I'll have to say no. The reason for this is that it is a watch from the original Pilot series, and we are keeping it as original as possible with the straight lugs, no logo, and the closed back. We also have the observation watch engraving on it, which is also typical of the Pilot watches from the 1940s, which were engraved on the inside of the case back, which is why we have stuck with the original design. So, no, it's not planned.
The second question we were asked was, will the dial also be available on the Erbstücke in the future?
That's a great question. Simple answer, and great news, or great news for the fans of the Erbstück series. The Wien and the Venedig with the Luminous dial are currently already in store as an Erbstück variant. What I personally find very, very exciting is that because we have a lot of surface area with Superluminova and not just the numbers and the hands, you can follow the aging process on the dial. So this looks very, very exciting.
Das sieht sehr, sehr spannend aus.
Und
the last question is, will the Luminous dials also be available on the basic models in the future? Is something like that planned?
Well, we already have Luminous dials on the basic model, but not in the Pilot range. But in the Navy Watch collection range, for example, the Casablanca also has a Luminous dial. But we don't yet have anything in that regard on the basic Pilot models. I don't want to give too much away now, but we have definitely given it some thought.
At this point, I would like to mention our newsletter. Please feel free to subscribe to it. It will keep you up to date whenever something happens in that direction. Let me follow up with a question. What upgrade options do we have here?
Okay, so as is typical for our Pilot watches, we of course have the option of upgrading from an elaboré movement to the top quality level. We can upgrade the internally anti-reflective sapphire crystal to a double anti-reflective sapphire crystal if required or desired. It is also possible to mount the crown on the left side for those who are bothered by it or for those who wear their watches on the right side. You can do that too. And of course, we also have the option of free engraving on the case.
Kostenfreien Gravur auf dem Gehäuseboden.
If you choose one of the 2 watches, it will be delivered to your home in a classic Laco travel case. And with that, we've come to an end. Thank you so much for being here, Dario.
With pleasure.
As always, we look forward to receiving lots of feedback. And if you subscribe to our Laco YouTube channel, you won't miss any more videos. And with that, we both say goodbye and see you next time.
Bye.